Hello and welcome to Cal Cinema Center. I'm your host, and I'll be discussing The Devil Wears Prada 2. This movie is directed by David Frankel and stars Anne Hathaway, Meryl Streep, Stanley Tucci, Emily Blunt, Kenneth Branagh, and Lucy Liu, among others. It takes place 20 years after the original, and it follows Andy's return to Runway magazine after being laid off from her position as a journalist at another company. Miranda and Nigel are experiencing their own crisis following Runway recently publishing an article on a clothes shop that uses sweatshop labor. Emily has moved on from Runway and is now working at Dior and married to a tech bro named Benji Barnes. This leads to the folks at Runway becoming entangled with the politics of billionaires and the ways they plan on downsizing Runway magazine. I rewatched the original the night before seeing this new one, and it still holds up thanks to its great character dynamics, acting, and splashy writing. It makes complete sense to me as to why it has so much staying power with audiences. The major question I had when I first heard that this movie was coming out was why? Besides the obvious reason of making money, there was no clear reason to make a sequel as all the original characters had clear arcs with very little room to bring them back together. With that said, I think The Devil Wears Prada 2 is able to answer that question in a compelling enough, albeit imperfect way. It uses the 20 years between these movies to comment on the changes that smartphones, industry consolidation, algorithms, and tech bros have brought to many walks of life, including the journalism industry. The tech bros in question are portrayed by Justin Theroux and BJ Novak, and they're delightfully cringeworthy while also feeling equally as insurmountable as they do in real life. Parts of it even feel metatextual. There's a point where Andy has a monologue talking about how companies will repackage things and suck out the soul and artistry. Another scene has a character telling Andy that she needs to find a way to write compelling journalism that is attention-grabby enough to find an audience. However, I don't think this movie fully escapes the traps of a legacy sequel, despite showing that it's self-aware enough. The way the central conflict is resolved particularly makes these themes about corporate money men forcing their will onto journalism and art feel a bit wasted. I'm glad that this is an IP blockbuster with a brain in a sea of complete sludge of IP movies that are designed to be as brainless and effortless as possible in effort to search for hype moments and aura and jangling keys. But I think there was probably a better way to execute this central idea, even if it mostly works. All right, with that said, the four central performers all slip back into their roles nicely and are very charming. I particularly enjoyed the increased presence of Stanley Tucci's Nigel. On the other hand, Emily Blunt's Emily feels a bit flanderized and lacking the same level of nuance she had in the first one. She's mostly a vehicle to create conflict with the tech bros. Even though her performance is still pretty good, just I don't think the writing was there to back her up. Most of the new cast members don't get much to work with, but Lucy Liu has a standout scene as a recent divorcee to Justin Theroux's character. She shares this scene with Meryl Streep's Miranda, and I think it very effectively builds on one of the best scenes in the original. The scene where Miranda is for once showing vulnerability towards Andy after her own divorce and how she believes the tabloids will sensationalize her situation. Andy herself feels less compelling here, as she's no longer the fish out of water audience surrogate as she is in the first movie, but she is still compelling enough, and Anne Hathaway's charm carries the character to the success that the script is unable to. One thing I'd say is an outright improvement from the original is that they focus less on the romantic storyline. However, it is more of a baby steps improvement. We go from having Andy bouncing between two uninteresting assholes in the first movie to having Andy seeing a very uninteresting man she has very little chemistry with. I get it's hard to match Anne Hathaway's screen presence, but it feels like they're barely trying here. However, it's still more tolerable than in the original because they spend such little time on it. In terms of presentation, it's a mixed bag. The cinematography is inconsistent, with many outdoor and international scenes looking quite colorful and good, while many interiors and American scenes being filmed in a very gray and flat way. There sure are a lot of needle drops here. The movie even stops to have Lady Gaga sing a new song she wrote for the movie. The song was not necessarily noteworthy, and the performance of it didn't add too much to the movie. It felt like the movie stopped to have Lady Gaga perform a song instead of having a natural build-up to it. I don't think many of these needle drops are too interesting in their use either. I'm a big fan of Leve, so as a big fan, as someone who has been listening to her for a while, I was very happy to hear Mr. Eclectic in the soundtrack, but I wish it was used in a more interesting way besides as window dressing for a party scene. I think this movie's biggest flaw is that it isn't particularly funny or memorable. Most scenes washed over me, and it felt like the movie was just turning its wheels once it comfortably got into the second act. It is truly a far cry from the original, which delivered one memorable scene after another. I'm a big laugher, particularly with the movies, and I didn't laugh once. I smiled a few times, some things were cute and clever, but never laugh out loud funny, which is a far cry from the original, in which there's many funny scenes. And even one of my favorite scenes on rewatch got me to cringe and squeal. It's the scene where Andy has to bring the book to Miranda's house and the kids end up tricking her. That scene is such effective cringe comedy, and I don't think anything in this movie comes close to it. It felt a little neutered as a whole. There were plenty of people laughing in my audience at various points, which made me even more desperate to laugh along with the crowd. But the movie just didn't do much to get me to laugh. However, one thing I will say is that it's well paced enough. I don't think I was ever truly bored, and it definitely, it entertains. It gets the job done. Ultimately, The Devil Wears Prada 2 is a movie that manages to be watchable despite its flaws, thanks to the sheer charm of its central performances and the intrigue of its themes. With that said, it is very flawed and a massive step down from the original. If the original became one of the most iconic chick flicks of the 21st century, this one feels merely like a footnote in comparison, a reunion special. It'll do the job if you're looking to kill an evening at the movies, but I'm unsure if it'll stick with people quite like the first one did. Now we'll move over to the ratings board, where I'll give my final score. Despite how negative this review sounds, I think its sheer watchability and attempts to explore themes regarding the loss of soul and culture, thanks to the advent of technology and algorithms and corporate consolidation, go a long way to keep this from being an unpleasant or negative experience. I'm giving this movie an it's alright. Please let me know what you all thought about this movie if you've seen it, if you're excited to see it, in the comment section below. And be sure to subscribe and leave a like if you enjoyed this video. I'll see you next time.